Otto Ernst Remer is the person usually accredited with putting down the attempted coup d'etat of the German military resistance to Nazi Germany on the 20th of July 1944. In this video, I shall give an account of his movements on that day, which is largely based on his own testimony. As you will see, he played a role, but not a role that was as crucial as that which is usually believed. The role you will normally see in books and films is the one concocted by Joseph Goebbels, whereby the propaganda minister demonstrated how a young National Socialist officer stayed loyal to the Hitler regime against the old-fashioned conservative army officers. That is a role that you will even see in the film Valkyrie. But it's not what happened. Here I describe what he did on the 20th of July 1944. If you'd like to hear a longer biography of his life, including what he did before, during and after the war, not just the events of the 20th of July 1944, then there's a link below and at the end of this video. For him, the 20th of July 1944 began like a normal day. At 16:10 he received the order to go to a meeting at the office of the city commander of Greater Berlin. Remer considered the city commander, Lieutenant General von Haase, to behave always as a National Socialist. Remer did not know that he was part of the coup attempt to overthrow Hitler. Von Haase immediately invited him into his office to speak, jumping the queue of others who had arrived earlier. He told him that Hitler was dead and that there was internal unrest and that the army had taken executive power. Remer was to throw a cordon around the government quarter, and now I'm quoting Remer's words directly, so that no minister or general could get in. Remer noticed that a new general staff officer, the 30-year-old Major Egbert Hyacinth, was in the office, but he kept himself to himself. Remer was dumbfounded. He immediately asked, "Is the Führer really dead? Did he have an accident or was there an assassination? Where did civil unrest break out? I didn't notice anything while driving through Berlin. Why does executive power pass to the army? Who is the Führer's successor? The successor would have to be the Reich Marshal, Hermann Göring. Are there any orders or calls from him?" Remer said that he didn't get very clear responses from General von Haase. Furthermore, some documents which were on the table of the city commandant were removed by Hyacinth and put in a folder. Remer said later, "On my way to the regiment, the thought dominated me. Hitler dead? Now there's a situation with no one in charge. Probably different people are trying to succeed him." Remer was suspicious. He recalled being told of the situation in 1918 in which the Berlin troops were accused of having contributed to the success of the revolution through their hesitation. Lieutenant Hans Wilhelm Hagen, who had previously worked for the Goebbels ministry before being called up, said, "Shortly after 1610, the adjutant, Lieutenant Siebert, reported that the code word Valkyrie had come through. Around 1645, Major Remer came in, as white as a sheet, and told the adjutant and me, an assassination attempt has been made on the Führer. Hagen also told Remer that he'd heard that Field Marshal von Brautisch had been seen in full uniform in Berlin. This was odd, as von Brautisch was retired. This appears to have been a rumour. Von Brautisch had been on the Führer Reserve since the 19th of December 1941, and I checked this one, and it appears to me that on the 20th of July 1944 he was at his estate, granted to him at Tri Trubki in occupied Czechoslovakia. After 20th July he sent an open letter stating his shock at the revolt and assuring Hitler of his loyalty. Therefore, either this was a rumour, or Remer was mistaken. Or alternatively, it could have been a mistake for someone else. Lieutenant Colonel Wolters, who had been assigned by the headquarters as a liaison officer, assured Remer that he shouldn't think that he was an informer. This unusual statement aroused Remer's suspicions even more. Shortly afterwards, Remer learned that Lieutenant Colonel Wolters had disappeared without giving notice. Remer later claimed that Wolters had just gone home, not the sort of thing an officer does when decisiveness is required. I think he's referring to Colonel Georg Walter, although I may be wrong. Colonel Walter was a 66-year-old officer and he'd been promoted 2 months earlier, which could be why Remer got his rank wrong. So why did he go home? Possibly he knew what was happening, and he didn't want to take sides until it was clear who was winning. Remer took charge and cordoned off the government district as ordered. However, the situation seemed somewhat bizarre to him. As a frontline soldier, he was used to clear orders. Why did General von Haase formulate many things so unclearly? Remer said later that he believed that there had been possibly a power struggle over Hitler's successor. Oberleutnant Hagen agreed. Whereas those that put up the cordons didn't know what was going on, they must have realised that it was something very serious, and this seems to me like a very long time given the short distances involved. It also appears to me that those that planned the coup may not have taken this into consideration. Having checked the deployments, Remer returned to the city commandant, General von Haase, to report completion. He was then instructed to cordon off the block north of the Anhalter Bahnhof, which included the building where the RSHA was located. The RSHA was the Reich Security Main Office. Remer didn't understand why he had not been given clear orders to cordon off the RSHA, which he stated he would have done. He returned to General von Haase and said, "Why, Herr General, am I getting orders that are so vaguely worded? Why am I not being told to pay special attention to the Reich Security Main Office?" Haase was very nervous and excited and didn't respond to the question. Remer, however, learnt that he was to arrest Goebbels. He responded to General von Haase, "General, I think I'm not the right man for this job. You know that I've been a member of the Großdeutschland Division for many years, and I'm still wearing their sleeve patches. You will be aware that Dr. Goebbels, as Gauleiter of Berlin, is also honorary colonel of the Großdeutschland Division. Only a fortnight ago I paid my personal inaugural visit to Goebbels in his capacity as honorary colonel of the Großdeutschland Division. For this reason, I consider it inappropriate to be instructed, to me of all people, to arrest my honorary colonel." Von Haase understood his objections and passed on the order to detain Reich Minister Goebbels to someone else. Hagen had meanwhile made contact with Goebbels. Remer's troops were the only ones in the Greater Berlin area. On leaving the office of von Haase, Remer was told in the corridor, "Completely new situation. It's probably a military coup. The Reich Defense Commissioner has asked you to come to him immediately. If you're not in 20 minutes, he'll assume that you're being held against your will. If this is the case, then he will feel compelled to alert the Waffen-SS." The Reich Defense Commissioner for Berlin was the Gauleiter, Joseph Goebbels. Remer returned to von Haase to ask permission to comply with this request. This was refused. However, Remer disobeyed the order. He was suspicious of Goebbels and seems to have thought that he was making a bid for power. In any case, he wanted to avoid a situation where the Waffen-SS would be fighting the Wehrmacht and felt that he had a responsibility for the lives of his troops, particularly in a situation where it was not clear if Hitler really was dead. He drove over to Goebbels and entered his office with pistol in hand. Goebbels asked him what he intended to do. Remer said that he had to carry out his orders even if Hitler were no longer alive. Goebbels looked at him in astonishment and said, "Why? The Führer is alive. I just spoke to him on the phone. The assassination attempt failed." Immediately after the bomb exploded, the communications officer at the Wolf's Lair, General Feldgebel, had been able to block most connections, but by this time, around 1900 hours, the lines were open again. The conspirators had hoped to block off all communications from Hitler's HQ for as long as possible. As it happened, there was a direct line that they did not know about, so that plan failed before it even started. Remer asked Goebbels for his word of honour that his statement was true and that he himself unconditionally supported Adolf Hitler. Goebbels hesitated at first, possibly because he didn't understand. Remer repeated himself that he needed his word of honour as a responsible officer. On getting it, Remer asked him to put him through to the Wolf's Lair by telephone. The connection was established within a minute, and Adolf Hitler was on the line personally. Goebbels informed him briefly about what was happening and then handed Remer the receiver. Adolf Hitler said something like, "Can you hear me? So, I'm alive. The assassination failed. A small clique of ambitious officers wanted to get rid of me. But now we have the saboteurs at the front. We'll make short work of them, this plague. Your task is to immediately restore peace and security in the Reich capital, if necessary by force. You will be personally subordinate to me for this purpose until the Reichsführer SS arrives. At this moment, Remer's doubts were dispelled. He started giving orders, even to people superior to him in rank, to stop any troop movements towards Berlin. Remer said later that he knew then that this was a matter of life and death for him. Remer unblocked the cordon around the government district and made the Goebbels villa at this street, then called Hermann Goeringstrasse, his command post. The battalion was concentrated. Goebbels passed his orders to him. Remer in turn ordered the army HQ at the Bendler Block to be attacked. As from around 1645, all the exits to the Army High Command were closed. Lieutenant Ahrens, who was the duty officer in the Bendler Block on the afternoon of the 20th of July 1944, stated that the order had come from General Albrecht. Hitler was dead and the army had to take over. They were warned that the SS might attack them, and therefore the army had to stop them by force if necessary. General Albrecht's order to fight the SS made Ahrens suspect something terrible. Those loyal to the National Socialist regime by this time realized that the building of the High Command of the Wehrmacht had been taken by the resistance, and that the troops of the reserve army stationed in the vicinity were on standby to march on Berlin. Remer stopped all troop movements with reference to his permission expressly granted by Hitler. The resistance also had failed to take the radio, and Remer ensured that this remained under his control. With normal radio broadcasting, everything seemed normal to people in Berlin. Suspicion and doubt was in the air in the early evening of the 20th of July 1944. Troops did not know which side they were on, nor which side other troops were on. There were instances in which units almost fired upon each other. Remer telephoned von Haase to ask him to come and see him at his command post in Goebbels' official home to clarify the situation. At first he refused the request and demanded that Remer come to his quarters as his subordinate. Only when Remer pointed out that Adolf Hitler personally assigned him the task of restoring law and order in Berlin, and that he was subordinate to him and would be fetched by force if he didn't come voluntarily, did he come to Remer. At that time, Remer still had the impression that von Haase had no knowledge of the true situation. Remer apologized to him for his behavior, but he stated later that Haase was kindness personified and expressed his appreciation for Remer's decision to see Goebbels, because in this way a lot of mischief was prevented. Towards Goebbels, he acted as if he had no idea what was going on. He was asked to stay, and he was assigned a room in the Goebbels home. At around 2200 hours, Oberleutnant Schley received the order to put a cordon around the Bendler Block and occupy it. All officers who did not declare themselves for Hitler were to be arrested. The building was occupied at around 23:15. By the time Remer arrived, Colonel General Fromm, the head of the reserve army, had commanded troops from the 4th Company to make up a firing squad. At around 30 minutes after midnight, on the 21st of July 1944, the 5 ringleaders of the revolt were shot. Remer was unable to stop the execution of the ringleaders. The Reich Security Main Office later investigated him but found him to be totally loyal to Hitler. Remer had had no contact whatsoever with the men of the 20th of July, apart from via his superior, General von Haase. The general had not revealed to Remer that he was opposed to Hitler. No one in the Großdeutschland unit had been involved in the uprising. This is what Remer learned of the conspiracy on the spot, and I am more or less quoting his words, so these are his impressions at the time, as seen with the benefit of hindsight.
After the assassination attempt, Stauffenberg flew to Berlin and met Field Marshal von Witzleben and Colonels General Herpner and Beck at the Bendler Block and began to issue orders together with General Albrecht. Colonel General Fromm, as Commander-in-Chief of the Reserve Army, was also asked to join, but he refused. When Fromm learned that Stauffenberg had personally killed Adolf Hitler, he wanted to arrest Stauffenberg. This led to the conspirators arresting Fromm and locking him up in his office. When it became known in the course of the afternoon that Adolf Hitler had survived, some general staff officers of the Bendler Block got together and organised a counter-movement that led to Fromm's liberation. The latter, now in possession of his freedom of action, turned the tables and had General Albrecht, Colonel von Stauffenberg and some other officers involved in the conspiracy tried by a court-martial and shot immediately. Colonel General Beck was given the opportunity to shoot himself. Field Marshal von Witzleben and Colonel General Herpner were arrested. That is not quite what happened, but as I said, they were his impressions. After Fromm had left the Bendler Block, Remer increased the security cordon around it. After this, he returned to his command post where he met Himmler. His troops were ordered to stand down when it got light. Although Remer was hailed as a figurehead by Nazi propaganda, his role was probably exaggerated. There were other officers who had remained loyal to the dictatorship. However, they did not know Goebbels as well as Remer did. Remer said later, "There was a rumour that the 20th of July plot failed because of my intervention. That honours me. However, personally, I am much more humble and would say that the coup failed from the start." To put the role of Remer into context, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel was able to initiate countermeasures as early as 1600 hours. From 1742, the news of Hitler's survival was repeatedly broadcast on the radio. Remer's telephone call to Hitler took place between 1835 and 1900 hours. Furthermore, the first soldiers of the Guard Battalion did not appear at the Bendler Block until around midnight, after officers loyal to the Nazi regime had already arrested the most important people in the attempted coup. Remer himself followed later.
Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that interesting. I have also got a much longer biography of Otto Ernst Remer, and there's a link now which should be appearing. So if you'd like to have a listen to that as well, then you might find it interesting. Bye for now.